Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to Jen's Books. I hope you're having an amazing week. In this video, I'm going to be talking about 6 books that I've plucked from my shelves. As you know, I have too many books, and all of those books have one thing in common. They were all winners of the Women's Prize for Literature, or whatever name it was under at that time. So my last video, 6 from the shelf, I talked about Booker Prize winners, and I thought it'd be quite nice to say, because it's still awards season and those prizes are still being decided, to pick 6 books from the Women's Prize that you may have heard of. Some will be more familiar than others, I expect. But what's slightly different is 5 of these are recommendations and one of them I DNF'd, and I've tried to read it twice now. And it would be interesting to know whether you think it's worth me persevering with, because sometimes it's just I'm reading something at the wrong time and I need to come back to it. But I've tried a couple of times now and it's just not grabbing me. But I'm going to work in reverse order, starting with the most recent winner that I want to discuss, which is actually the 2021 winner, Piranesi, by Susanna Clarke. And Susanna Clarke's only written one novel once before, and that was Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, and that was 16 years previous to Piranesi. And I'd quite enjoyed that. It's quite a thick book. It's sort of almost like dark academia, but meets fairy tale, set in Victorian London. There's sort of hints of Waterloo and all sorts of things going on. It's an incredibly ambitious book, and I remember finding it quite dry at points, but incredibly original. Loads of really fresh ideas, drawing on the fairy tale mythology and the Green Man. So I quite enjoyed it, but I think if I read it now, I'd probably enjoy it more. Sometimes with books, it's reading it at the right time. But because of that experience, it made me a little bit reluctant to read Piranesi. But I'm so glad I did. I'm so glad I did. It's quite a quick book compared to Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. Really easy to get into, very accessible. It's the idea of all the character is called Piranesi, and he's living in this place called the House. And basically it seems to be a series of joined high marble rooms with columns and sculptures, which floods periodically. He has to move around this house, and he doesn't really remember a life before living in the house. And the book begins with his very detailed recordings of life living in this strange universe, this strange fantasy plane that that Susanna Clarke's invented. It does have quite a few classical influences, but you don't need to know those. It reminded me of The Magician's Nephew. There's a part in The Magician's Nephew by C.S. Lewis where the 2 characters jump into a puddle and they disappear into this strange world where they meet the Ice Queen for the first time. And it kind of reminds me of that, with these sort of statues and archaic architecture. But Piranesi is a mystery. He's a mystery wrapped in a riddle. We don't know where he is, why he's there. And to add things, to complicate things further, there's only one other character called the Other, who Piranesi meets with once every 2 weeks. The Other has employed Piranesi to find something that's hidden. It's called the Great and Secret Hidden Knowledge that's somewhere in the house. So Piranesi has to record all his journeys across this vast fantasy land, recording what he sees, looking for this knowledge. And then another character appears. He starts seeing someone else, and after spending all this time alone, it sort of spirals. Everything sort of, it becomes something completely unexpected. It's very difficult to explain this book without spoilers, but I don't want to ruin it for you. I really enjoyed it. As I say, it's a fantasy that is unlike anything I've read before, but the wording is so accessible, and the character, I just wanted to root for him. Although it feels quite slow to begin with, not a lot happens to begin with, I still was drawn on by this strange question of where was he? What is this place that he finds himself in? Is it another world? Is it something that's connected to our world? We know that the Other's bringing him gifts or supplies from somewhere that seems like it must be more akin to where we live. But yeah, definitely recommend it. The second book is one that I've spoken about before. and it's not going to be much of a surprise to anybody, which is Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. And you'll know her novel, The Marriage Portraits, currently in the shortlist for the Women's Prize. But Hamnet won back in 2020. And I love this book. But if you're going to read it, pack tissues. It's one of those. I cried for about halfway through the book, all the way through. It just made me sob so much. It's about Shakespeare's wife. Shakespeare's never named by name, but he's sort of referred to throughout the book. But it's very much about Agnes, and it covers about how they met, how they fell in love, and I don't think it's any spoilers to know that it leads to the death of their son Hamlet from the bubonic plague, at a time when death was something that was all around the people. But they managed to make it. Maggie O'Farrell manages to make it so that it pierces your heart completely. It's just so sad to read. But the book itself is really accessible. The language is lyrical. There's a sort of mixture of folklore. Agnes is kind of this magical wild creature who has this connection with nature. And it's really interesting. It's interesting to see her as a character in her own right. And as I say, you know, you do... Shakespeare does appear in it, but it's about her. It's very much about her, and it's the domestic setting that's sort of disconnected for anything that Shakespeare as a playwright living in the city would be experienced. Everything's around their little family and the events that take place to them. But Hamlet is fabulous. I'm sure, you know, you'd have to have been living under a rock not to have heard of it. But if you've not read it yet, do read it. If you read The Marriage Portrait but weren't too sure about that, still read Hamlet. It's just fabulous, and there's a real wonderful back catalogue of work from Maggie O'Farrell to explore as well. The next book I wanted to mention is another one that I have mentioned briefly before, and that is Kamila Shamsie's Home Fire. And Kamila Shamsie's Home Fire was the winner back in, sorry, just checking my notes, back in 2018. It was actually written in 2017. And I've spoken about this book before. It's a reimagining of Sophocles, the ancient Greek play Antigone. And but it's sort of set in a British Muslim community. And it's all about disillusionment. It's all about power. Basically, we have twins that are called Parvey and Anika. Anika would have been Antigone, and Parvey is the brother that Antigone goes out to bury. And then their older sister Isma, who is the one that's sort of a bit more settled, has a bit more common sense, is slightly less ruled by passion, I would say. And Anika's also having a relationship with the son of the Home Secretary, so there's a political involvement as well. But Parvey decides he wants to follow in the footsteps of his brother, and he goes off to become to join ISIS. And when he gets there, he discovers that actually, you know, that is a mistake. He doesn't want to be in Syria. So his sister comes out to try and get him out of that situation. And I thought that, I mean, Antigone is a great story anyway. One of the reasons it's remained so popular is that the themes in it just seem to remain relevant again and again. It's retold again and again in different ways. And here it really made me think about the plot in a completely different way, and it made me really think about the characters' experiences and their relationships and their identities. And it's a book about identity, it's a book about loyalty, it's a book about alienation, it's a book about being influenced, and it's a book about what we do for love. And it has a really, you know, difficult ending. I don't want to give too much away, but anybody who knows the Antigone story will probably know, but you don't need to know that either. If it puts you off that it's based on Sophocles, don't let that put you off. You don't need to know the story to enjoy this novel. And again, strongly recommend this one, as you know, because I've mentioned it a couple of times now. Next is the one I DNF'd, and I've been trying to read this again, and it's The Power by Naomi Alderman. And this was the winner in 2017. It was written and published in 2016. And I've tried twice to read this. I really want to read it. I mean, I invested, it's even a signed edition. I really wanted to read this. And at the time, I put the fact that I didn't get very far with it, the fact that it was at a time that felt quite politically scary with things that were happening across the world, and it felt too possible. I bought this at the same time I bought Vox, or around the same time, and I didn't read that for the same reason. So I thought that that was maybe why I hadn't read this. But I tried it again in the last couple of weeks, and again, you can't really see, but I've not got very far. So what I want to ask you is this, in your opinion, if you've read this book, is it worth me continuing with? Because I will continue with it. Or maybe it's one I need to put away and come back to. But it's even got a quote from Margaret Atwood on the front. So, you know, it seems to have everything that I look for. It's an apocalyptic story. You know, I like those. But I just don't know why. I don't know whether it's because there's so many characters. At the beginning of the book, it jumps from woman to woman really, really quickly. And my head's spinning a little bit, trying to keep up with what is happening where. And maybe that's, you know, the only reason. Maybe I just need to push through with it. But basically, the premise is that it's actually a novel by a man that he sent to a female publisher to get feedback on. It's supposed to be kind of like a parody. So there's this sense of a novel, you know, within a novel that's within a novel. But it's in a society where women start to be able to produce electrical charges in their bodies and pass those through to other people, and basically they can shock people when they're feeling threatened. And so it's leading to sort of this change in power dynamics across the genders, but I've not got very far with it. And so I wanted to include this because I wanted to know whether you'd read it, whether you think it's worth continuing with. It's just recently been changed into, or adapted into, a series as well. I think it's on Netflix, so you may have seen it from that. So it's definitely a very popular novel. It's had loads of you know, positive feedback and reviews, but for some reason I'm just not getting very far with it. So I'd really like to know what your thoughts are on that one. The next one I wanted to mention is the winner from 2011, which is The Tiger's Wife by Tia Obreht. And it's quite a difficult cover to read, this one. This is one that I read online on a Kindle originally, and then brought a paperback copy when I saw it because I enjoyed this book so much. It's quite an unusual book. It's very different. The other thing I like about these prize lists is you get such a variety of subject matter, you know, if you look from year to year. But this is actually a debut novel as well, which is far too good. It doesn't have a right to be a debut novel, but it's written by a Serbian American writer, Tia Obreht, and it's a generational story. It's spanning about 70 years, 50, 70 years, and it's about a relationship between a female doctor and her grandfather, and the stories that he tells her or told her when she was a child. And when she hears that he's passed away, she goes to try and sort of unravel the mysteries that he's left behind. But some of the stories he told her were, for example, the deathless man who he encounters on several occasions during his life, and also the story of a deaf-mute girl who befriends an escaped tiger. And the location is never explicitly explained, but we get the idea that it's actually Belgrade, but it's just sort of somewhere in the Balkans that it's described of. But the story about the zoo being bombed is something that has actually happened a couple of times, first in Belgrade by the Nazis, and then more recently in the former Yugoslavia as well. So she's drawing on her experiences, but also folklore, and this love between, this intergenerational relationship between this granddaughter and her grandfather. But I really enjoyed this book, and if you like things that include a bit of folklore, a bit of magic realism, then this is an enjoyable one to pick up. Finally, we're going all the way back to 2002, Bel Canto by Anne Pratchett. So this was written in 2001 and won the prize in 2002. And this is an interesting, but this is another one that I picked up and put down. But one of my very good friends said, no, you've got to read this book. You've got to read this book. And I'd read The Dutch House by Anne Pratchett, which came out a few years ago, and I really, really loved that. So then I went on and read quite a few of her novels, including The Commonwealth. And I picked this one up again, and to begin with, again, I didn't want to read it. The premise is it's very, very loosely based on a real event that happened with the Japanese embassy in Peru in 1996, 1997, where a group of people who were attending a party were held hostage. So it's very, very loosely based on this. But the opening is all about a soprano singing, and I don't know what it was. It just turned me off. But actually, once I got reading and I progressed past it, I found it a really enjoyable read. There's tension here that, you know, this is not a hostage situation that's cleared up quickly, and over time there's sort of a blurring of who's in the right and who's in the wrong, and these relationships between hostages and the people who were keeping them hostage. So I found this a really interesting book. So the tension and the way that these relationships in this enclosed space in this one building change over time, and the characters are interact with each other, and the way that music is threaded through it does work. It was just that opening that initially put me off, but there's sort of a sense of time being paused, of what would happen if a group of people were just whisked away somewhere else, and the world is carrying on without them, but they are in this really strange situation where they're thrown in together, and it almost becomes a sense of normal to them. But yeah, I really enjoyed this, and if you've not read Anne Pratchett before, I'd definitely recommend Bel Canto, and I'd also recommend The Dutch House, which I really loved. So there you have it, another 6 prize winners for you to think about and consider reading. And as always, I'd really love to know whether you've read them before, what your thoughts are, particularly The Power. Is it worth me reading? Should I stick or should I twist and read something else? It would really be great to know what your thoughts are on that particular novel. If you're new to the channel, do please follow, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the comments. Do remember you can ask questions or tell me what your thoughts are on these books, and I shall see you again later in the week. Thanks. Bye.